Welcome to Illuminating Catholics, podcast of the Diocese of Sioux City. I'm Dawn Prosser, Director of Communications for the Diocese. Together with Carmen Bauer of the Faith Formation Office, we will shed light upon topics of faith in the modern church. Our guests include Catholic clergy, religious sisters, and other experts in their fields to help us understand what's happening in the church today. We will explore issues, even the tough ones, and to find answers to common questions about Catholicism. Thank you for joining us for today's Illuminating Catholics, shedding light to understand the modern church. Welcome back to the Illuminating Catholics podcast. I am Dawn Prosser, Director of Communications for the Diocese of Sioux City.
And I'm Carmen Bauer, the Director of Faith Formation.
Thank you so much for listening and for your feedback. We really do appreciate hearing from all of you. Another tough topic prevalent today in the Catholic Church is pastoral planning. It's a challenging and emotional topic, and we'll be discussing it to provide facts and answers to common questions regarding pastoral planning. Today, we have our Diocesan Director of Planning and Bishop Keehner's Chief of Staff, Deacon Mark Prosser, and our Diocesan Judicial Vicar and Pastor of the Cathedral Parish in Sioux City, Father David Esquiliano, who assists the bishop, both of them assist the bishop with pastoral planning. They will help us sort out what it is, why we're doing it, and what to expect in the future. So we welcome Father David back to the studio and welcome Deacon Mark to the studio.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yes, thanks for joining us today. So as we lead into this conversation, we'll kind of start with you, Mark. Can you give us a little bit of background on just the term pastoral planning and maybe the history in our diocese?
Pastoral planning, as it's applied in our diocese, is looking at the structure of the diocese and restructuring the diocese based on everything from the numbers of people pursuing sacraments, the numbers of people attending Mass, the size of our parishes, and how many priests we have in active ministry to serve those in our diocese. And then how do we create a structure looking 5 and 10 years out to ensure that all of our faithful will have access to the Eucharist, access to the sacraments, and so on.
And when did these conversations really begin in the Diocese of Sioux City?
They really began incrementally about 30 years ago, and they have kind of occurred, gone dormant, occurred, gone dormant, with a very, with some pastoral planning, some mergers, even some church closures occurring 10, 15 years ago. But it really got serious in 2016 with a planning process called Ministry 2025 that looked at how many priests would be in active ministry in the year 2025. Interesting enough, the year we're in right now. That plan went really obsolete within about 18 months of its activation due to unexpected retirements, illnesses, and then choosing not to pursue the seminary. And then again in 2020, where we are now in earnest, Bishop Nicholas at that time kind of reactivated the pastoral planning office, and it has moved on in a more systematic way of merging parishes.
Now, why is this a conversation that we have to have? Why is this a process that we've had to begin implementing?
Well, when you look at the data, and we go back to 1980, 1990, there's been a constant decline of both registered Catholics and Catholics participating in their faith. Going beyond that, we see a constant decline in First Communions and baptisms and all of the sacraments, as well as in vocations and in priest in active ministry. If you go back into the early 80s, we had about 166 priests serving our 24 counties of the Sioux City Diocese. Today, we have 36 priests in active ministry, taking care of all 24 counties. Of those 36, about 9 to 10 of them are eligible for retirement within the next 10 years, and we only have 11 men in the seminary. And so these are the types of numbers that our bishops have to deal with in looking at what's best for our diocese and how do we restructure our parishes to take care of the business portion of the parish smarter and perhaps relieve some of those duties from the pastors so that they can be evangelizing and ministering in the type of work that they truly signed up for.
Certainly. And I know that most people in our parishes have already encountered pastoral planning or it's in effect in some way. But one thing that we do see as members of the Diocese of Sioux City are those decrees that come out that we might see in the Lumen Notes or other things. So, Father David, can you share with us, what do these decrees mean? We hear words like merging, extinction. Can you give us that canon law perspective and overview?
Sure. So in the Catholic Church, we believe that the parish is the people. But there's also a judicial reality or a legal reality, rather. And each parish is also a body in itself and, again, a legal figure. So everything that the bishop does has to be done in a legal way. Even though the bishop has the authority to make changes to the structure of the parishes, he cannot just say so and that happens. It has to go through a process that will result in a decree or a decision. That perhaps we could use that word. The term decree is just a legal term for the communication of a decision by the bishop. And among those different options, a parish could be created or erected, a new parish. So sometimes it happens that 2-3 parishes join and form a brand new parish. Again, because the parish are the people, not the buildings. So for example, a parish here in the city that I'm thinking of, the parish of Mater Dei. It was formed by 2 churches, Nativity and Immaculate Conception. The churches remain as Nativity, Immaculate Conception, but so there is this new parish erected. The parishes of Nativity and Immaculate Conception were extincted. They don't exist anymore, and they are part of this new parish. Sometimes other parishes prefer to merge into another existing parish, or the bishop decides that's the correct way. People can certainly, through pastoral planning process with Deacon Prosser, they can make a suggestion, but in the end, again, it's all the bishop's decision. So, for example, my parish, there are 3 churches. They used to be independent parishes: St. Boniface Parish, St. Joseph's Parish, and the Cathedral Parish. And what happened in that case, instead of erecting a new parish, creating a new parish, the parishes of St. Boniface and St. Joseph were merged into the parish of the Cathedral. Again, these are legal terms we have to think of the people. It is the people that are merging into a new parish or being received into a parish that already existed.
And are those decrees essential and required by the church as part of canon law?
Absolutely. Anytime that the bishop makes a decision, there has to be some legal certainty. Because what will happen if the bishop were to say, for example, to his priest, I want these parishes to merge? How do we know that's what he really wanted? Can we prove that that's what he really wanted? And that's why we need documents. And before he even gets to that document, there's a process of consultation with people, with body of priests, which is a pastoral council, kind of like a senate for the bishop. And there has to be that legal certainty. There has to be a document that is safeguarded in the diocese with a copy in the parish. So that's essential.
So, Mark, you talked about in the first section here about Ministry 2025 really ramping up around 2016. And then also since 2020, there's been kind of another surge of efforts there. So can you just kind of give us a briefing on what's happened since 2020? You hear things like, oh, they're closing a lot of churches and so forth. But what's really happened since that time?
It's important to understand terminology. Father David reminds me of that on a regular basis. Bishop Nicholas closed no churches. Bishop Keehner, I don't think, will either, unless it's requested by the local pastor and local leadership. But in mergers, the status of churches change. So we have parish churches, we have secondary churches, we have church buildings. And under the terminology of church building, those churches do not have regular masses. And there's a specific type of liturgy they can have and certain rules for them. So if I'm in a community and my church becomes a church building and it's no longer having daily mass or weekend mass, to me it's closed. So we have to understand that canonically it's not, to the faithful it is. So since 2020, the Presbyteral Council, the bishops, the College of Consultors, and the Diocesan Pastoral Planning Committee have repeatedly reviewed data and looked at this topic and continue to believe that looking at the data from the history and projections into the future, that merging our parishes is the smart way to go in dealing with diminishing numbers of priests in active ministry and diminishing numbers of people pursuing the sacraments and participating in their faith, and really being smarter on how we manage these parishes. So we have systematically worked from the east end of the diocese to the west. Webster County in Fort Dodge, they've been doing this for 20 years, and so they're well ahead of the curve and have some great success stories there. And of course, they're on our eastern side, so there was really no method to the madness. We just started on the east side, working west, working with our pastors, their leadership committees, and the faithful in working towards canonical mergers of all of our parishes into a larger structure. And within that, some of the churches were secondary churches, some were church buildings based on conversations with the pastors and consultations with the bishop and his variety of leaders, leadership committees, and so on. That's where we're at today, to the point where we only have about 6 parish groupings that we need to continue to do those mergers on. Along that process, there have been bumps in the road, some procedural errors, and I'll let Father talk about that, where we've kind of had a start over, but nevertheless, that train has continued to move in the same direction in order to, again, free up our pastors, encourage laity, deacons to get more involved in the administration of parishes, in order to free up our pastors, and in order to restructure and bring vitality to our parishes, merge music programs, merge faith formation programs, and use the talents also that exist in these parishes to work with each other now as a newly stood up parish.
And that kind of dovetails into our next thought. If you would expound upon a little bit some of the successes that you've seen in your years working with planning in the diocese.
We've had great stories and from our pastors and some of their staff, again, starting with Fort Dodge, who's been at this longer than many, but coming across our diocese, a variety of our parishes where they have staff restructured themselves internally and have really growing and thriving faith formation programs. A lot of folks in line to join the church through the OCIA program and that process and so on. We're seeing some good successes there, and a lot of people have said, because this is a painful process, that this will damage the church, it will kill our parishes. And actually, in the last year or two, we've seen a bump up in numbers of registered Catholics. We've seen some slight increases in our sacraments. We've seen the impact of our parishes working successfully, merged together, and this new vitality that's being brought. It's very much a marathon. The changes are slow, and in some cases will be generational. But nevertheless, we're seeing a positive impact from pastoral planning.
What also are some of the challenges that you've seen? Because as we all know, change is never easy sometimes. So what have you seen that's challenging?
You know, one of the largest groups that have requested pastoral planning is our presbyter, our priests. They know what's ahead of them, especially our young priests, and what challenges they're going to have to face. But nevertheless, we have come across those pastors that aren't maybe walking the same walk as our bishop, and that causes some challenges in maneuvering and navigating those waters. There's a lot of folks upset, and I understand that these changes are occurring, that there might be a new umbrella parish form, that they may not be able to go to weekday or weekend or Sunday Mass at their parish or at their church. That brings pain, and with that pain brings opposition. And those are all concerns that our bishops now have had to listen to, have had to evaluate, as well as their leadership team. and still try to maneuver these waters. I have to remember that those who might be frustrated and angry look at this pastoral planning process through the lens of their church, their community, their parish. Our bishop has to look at it from 10,000 feet from a diocesan standpoint and project out what will the needs be of our diocese going into the future. And that's where sometimes the rub is, what perspective you have to approach this from.
Thank you.
If you don't mind me just saying something about that, I mean, there's a mourning process. People are losing something, and that's a reality that we as pastors also have to deal with. And that may also be happening in the priests as well. That's something we forget as well. Priests that grew up in a parish have also seen their parishes being merged into a different one. And there's a mourning process. So, like with any loss, we all react in a different way. There are some people that stay in the anger phase, and hopefully they will just get out of that phase, because we cannot live in anger. But the reality is they're mourning. Perhaps they had dreams of seeing their children getting married at that church, and suddenly they are told, well, that may not happen. So there is that mourning process. I've seen people that have been very angry at pastoral planning, that years later they realize, well, that was actually a good idea, because now we belong to a larger community. We have better music program. You mentioned music earlier. We have better catechesis. So it is just sometimes allowing people to grieve.
Following up on that idea, obviously people upset, grieving at change of status in their parish. So along those lines, there have been appeals to the bishop's decrees and moving forward through the Vatican court system. I know it's really complicated, and Father David's been trying to explain it to me for a couple of years now, but can you explain it a little bit in a sense that people can understand what's happening and how it really works?
Right. I won't get too technical here.
Okay.
But any person who feels aggrieved by the bishop's or any decision by the bishop, in this case we're talking about pastoral planning, but any decision by even a church, any church authority, but again, we're talking about the bishop. The law, church law, canon law, allows them to follow a process to make their grievance known. So in this case, if somebody says, well, my parish should have been merged because of this or that reason, they have the opportunity of coming directly to the bishop. That's the first step. Coming to the bishop and say, Bishop, I think you made the wrong decision, and this is why. And bishop reviews whatever is presented to him, and then he decides, do I amend the decision? Do I rescind or completely get rid of that decision? Or do I just tell them this is it based on the information that I have? Most of the decrees that we have seen that have been appealed by people, the bishop, because it is a decision that he has reached through research and consultation, he has decided to keep those decisions. So if people say, well, no, I'm still unhappy, I still believe the bishop was wrong, they can appeal to the Vatican, to the Dicastery for Clergy, which oversees bishops. Because what they're doing is going to the Vatican saying, my bishop made the wrong decision. So that's why they go to that dicastery or department, we could say, the Vatican. And then there's a couple steps, and people at that dicastery will review the bishop's decision. Now, it is important to understand that when the Vatican reviews any decree, they're mostly looking at procedural errors. That means, as I said earlier, there is a procedure that has to be followed, there is some consultation that needs to happen, and they will see if bishop made the wrong decision, not the decision he reached, but how he got to that decision. If the dicastery says, well, the bishop was right, he did everything he needed to do, will uphold his decision, then people have another court to appeal. We could think of that as the Supreme Court, the Vatican. So they can appeal there, and again, there's a couple steps there. But again, what they will review is the procedure in this case followed by the lower court, so the Dicastery for Clergy, and the decision of the bishop. So that's why most of the decrees have been upheld, because the bishop has the right to make these decisions. I was at a recent conference, and somebody pointed out a document from 1966, right after the Second Vatican Council by Pope Paul VI, in which he tells bishops, parishes which are too small should be united insofar as the situation demands it and circumstances permit. So this is something that bishops have the authority, the church has given the authority from a long time. This is nothing new. This is, Deacon Prosser was talking about 1980 when everything began here. Well, this is something even older than that. So that's what the Vatican looks at, how the bishop reached that decision, which he has the right to make.
So they're not necessarily judging on what his decision was, but all these different procedures. And Mark had mentioned something about sometimes procedures make us step back a little bit. Do you want to expound on that?
Right. So the main thing that bishop needs to do is consultation. We hear the word synodal now a lot, the synod, and that's practically what the church has been for a long time. The church has been synodal. The church has asked for consultation for a long time. We haven't used the word, but the consultation has existed there. So bishop has to consult with the pastor, even though that's not mentioned in the law, but that makes sense that he's the representative of the parish. He may consult with other people, which does happen in our diocese through different means, either by meetings with Deacon Prosser or by letters or people contacting the bishop directly. But the main consultation that needs to happen is with the pastoral council. And right during COVID, we couldn't meet. So a lot of meetings started happening via Zoom or remotely. And then there was a decision by the Vatican that, well, COVID is over, consultation via Zoom is no longer permitted. We were slow getting those news here. So what happened is we did some consultation via Zoom, and the Vatican said, well, that wasn't allowed. We had already told you not to do it, even though we had heard the news. So those decisions were overturned. But we were told right away, or Bishop was told right away, it is your right to make this decision. And you can go ahead and resume the process. I don't want to say restart because some of the consultation was already done. So just basically resume the process or correct the errors.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
When we look at pastoral planning, we kind of talk about it locally in the Diocese of Sioux City, but are other dioceses involved in this type of planning as well?
It's a great question, because quite often when I'm out visiting with parishes and parishioners, they'll say, Sioux City is the only diocese that's doing this. And that's just can't be farthest from the truth. It's very prevalent in Europe and in Canada, our East Coast through the Midwest. I mean, really the only areas that aren't involved in pastoral planning in the United States amongst the Catholic dioceses are in the South and Southwest, where they're experiencing growth in those communities. And so it is happening. It happens in different ways, in different speeds, different processes, but nevertheless, the observation that, again, less men are pursuing the seminary, less people are practicing their faith, and less sacraments are being pursued, is a reality in our church in many different parts of the world, and most certainly across the United States. The Sioux City Diocese, in some respects, is maybe a little bit farther down the road than other dioceses, and for that reason, we get called on a regular basis. How do you do this? Why do you do this? What's your process? As many dioceses are gearing up to do the same thing. I know that Father David and I have both met with other dioceses to discuss our process, and these are dioceses sometimes that our faithful will quote in their concerns, have busloads of priests that want to come to the Sioux City Diocese and serve here, and it's just a myth, when in fact these dioceses are looking at the very same challenges that our bishop and our diocese are. Just within the last few weeks, Father David and I both joined the presbyterate and their bishop of the St. Cloud, Minnesota Diocese to go over what we're doing as they're getting ready to launch a very diocese-wide program, a very sweeping program of mergers and what that might look like for them. So, it's not something to brag about. It's a challenge. It's sad for our church. But, in the case of Iowa, of Northwest Iowa, of our diocese, sometimes it's a perfect storm. It's just not about less faithful pursuing the sacraments. We're also seeing in 16 of our 24 counties diminishing population overall. So all of this is kind of happening at one time. Less people pursuing their faith, less people pursuing vocations, all occurring at the same time.
And are you noticing when other dioceses reach out to you that they have similar questions and concerns? Are they having to go this path due to low vocations as well and changing demographics? What are some of those themes that you've found?
The themes are all reoccurring. It's all very consistent across the board. The other thing that's very consistent across the board is the pain and angst that these changes bring, and those who might want to question the decisions of their bishops. We've seen that also regularly, and that's just part of the process. And as Father shared, they're right to do that. So we have to maneuver those and make sure we're doing everything procedurally correct. But all of the reasons that I stated and that our bishops have stated in the Sioux City Diocese are very consistent with the other dioceses.
Certainly. Can you share with us what's next for our diocese?
Well, some of what's next is yet to come with Bishop Keehner's arrival, and he comes from a diocese that's heavily involved in pastoral planning and mergers. In fact, they just announced a series of mergers about 2 weeks ago in Youngstown. But he's still evaluating. He has met with the pastoral planning committee, the diocesan pastoral planning committee. He has discussed this with his presbyteral council. Some items of pastoral planning have passed across his desk. And with only about a half a dozen areas left, at least the marching orders for my office is to continue as we've been doing, and let's try to get those completed. And so then what happens next might depend on the continued analysis of populations and registered Catholics. Are we going to get a big bump maybe by the grace of God in vocations? So a lot of that might be 5 years, 10 years down the road. But right now we're trying to structure if the numbers continue to diminish, or if the bishop has to deal with unexpected changes. At any one time, there could be several of our priests in active ministry that are challenged by medical issues that may have to come out of active ministry. He has to have the ability to pivot and to ensure that that pastoral needs of the parishioners in that area, that particular parish, can be met. How do you do that when you don't have a lot of reserves on your bench?
Certainly. Are there any final thoughts for our listeners about pastoral planning that either of you would like to share?
As a pastor of a parish that went through a merger process at the beginning of this latest wave of mergers, I can tell people that there is light at the end of the tunnel. I shared actually with the Diocese of St. Cloud when we were there that when I arrived, we had 3 Christmas Eve masses in the parish, because that's what they used to do, and that's what was kept for a while. And they were all poorly attended, and it was a struggle to get musicians, and therefore the music wasn't the best that at least a couple of those masses ended up having. But a couple of years ago we decided, well, it's our time to be one parish, and we had one single English Christmas Eve Mass that was pretty well attended. It was packed. There was a beautiful choir singing. And people that just 2 or 3 years prior had said, I will never set foot in that other church because they absorb ours, were there. And they enjoyed the Mass so much, and they complimented the music and how full the church was and how many families there were. So yeah, it is a difficult process. Yes, there is mourning. Yes, there is loss. But we believe in the resurrection, and that's what we experience in our parishes as well.
I would just echo Father David that we are continuing to hear and witness that light at the end of the tunnels as our pastors and their staffs are maneuvering these changes and these mergers and bringing forward some really neat success stories. And to assist them, I know our bishop has really bolstered different offices, faith formation being one of them, to be in this, to back these parishes up and help them in this time of change. But change is difficult and it hurts. And our bishops are well aware of that pain. They hear it from the faithful on a regular basis. And they very much would like Bishop Keehner to get to a point where we're working on the healing side and what does this mean moving forward, and get the changing side put to rest for a while. But pastoral planning, depending on what the future brings to the Catholic Church, as predicted actually by Pope Benedict when he was a bishop, that it would be shrinking and narrowing but much more faithful. It might be around for a while, but take different forms as we adapt to the changes of the Church.
We thank both of you for coming in. I know you both have busy schedules, because we know pastoral planning is a really complex and difficult issue in dioceses, including ours, as we adapt to those changing demographics in our areas and in our churches, our communities. So thank you for coming in and explaining the process a little more and sharing some of the data as we continue to work toward the future in this journey. And thank you all for listening to today's Illuminating Catholics. We hope you enjoyed this episode and learning more about what's going on in the church in Northwest Iowa. New episodes drop each Tuesday wherever you get your podcasts or at lumenmedia.org. Thank you for listening to this episode of Illuminating Catholics, shedding light to understand the modern church. Follow us for more episodes on topics of the Catholic faith. For more diocesan news, visit lumenmedia.org.